All right, good evening, fellow protectors. Welcome to Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. Greg LeBoeuf here with you. Got Brad Vandelay, Dustin Dodere with me. As usual, we are here to talk about the weaponization process. Listen, tonight's conversation, I titled this Danger Close. And specifically, I'm going to talk about two elements. Danger close is just a military term. It's actually often used when friendlies are real close to a enemy, when they're going to call in potential airstrikes or different military actions where the good guys are in proximity to the bad guys, and so you are often referred to as being danger close. But sometimes you have no alternative but to try to call in airstrikes and different things virtually right on top of yourself, hoping for a pinpoint strike to help neutralize the enemy. The context I thought of this was danger close, really just referring to close quarter combat, and specifically two kind of parts, two elements that I want to talk about tonight. One of them is obstructions and the second is attachments. And both of those can occur at danger close proximity to the enemy. However, obviously close quarter combat, especially if you're involved with mass attack, you got edged impact weapons. We are going to find ourselves danger close to the enemy many times. And so obstructions and attachments are two elements that I think people need to really understand what they are, what the differences are. Yes, I want to get a little bit into some of the kind of strategic and tactical solutions that we use. But of course, anyone that's listening to this is going to have a different level of experience. So we're not going to get super specific with some of what the tactical solutions are. But I think that the great start place, and hopefully you guys will agree, is people just have to understand what the difference is and why we have to have an understanding of what obstructions and attachments are and how they facilitate or how they operate or how they happen in the danger close type engagement. So it's a really powerful episode. You really want to understand this. You want to add this understanding to your arsenal. So I'm going to cut to our intro. We're going to be back in just a few seconds, and we're going to start talking about close quarter work and danger close. Every day I hear more stories of issues who is free to walk the streets in the same city where I live, work, and where I am raising my two daughters. Well, I'm tired of screaming at the TV, and enough is enough. Throughout history, there have always been men willing to answer the call to the threats against our way of life. Well, today, that threat is right outside our doors, on our streets, in our neighborhoods, on our public transportation system, outside the places we work, and even outside of our children's schools. My new mission is to create and train a group of men that believe in the right to life and value the freedom a man has to protect his life, his family, and his property. I'm Greg LeBoeuf. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man. Talking danger close on this episode of the podcast. And specifically, I want to talk about obstructions and attachments and how these play out in close quarter combat. So I think we're just going to set up a real general definition here. But when you think about close quarter work, when you are in close proximity to violent predatory criminals, there are two things that can happen that, again, we need to identify, and we need to have a strategy and tactics to understand how to, circumvent these two things. So the first one is called an obstruction. Now, an obstruction is any time that you have a distance between two opponents or two combatants, and one side is attempting to close that proximity. Matter of fact, one of the most dangerous and difficult things to do in combat is to bridge distance, is to close the gap. Okay, so one of the things that can actually happen, now remember, this can be from the perspective of the good guy or the bad guy, but one of the things that can happen is as you are trying to close the gap or the enemy is attempting to close the gap, you can either run into an obstruction or you can put up an obstruction. So what is an obstruction? An obstruction is basically a barrier. It is anything that would stop, either mitigate or completely nullify the enemy or the good guy's ability to close the distance. Okay, now I want to actually talk more about the physical, because there's always the physical or the natural tools on the body, There's designed and there's expedient. So, for example, just to give everyone a quick illustration, if a bad guy is trying to close the gap on me or move towards me or my family, and all of a sudden I'm able to put a chair or a table between us, that is a barrier. That would be an example of an expedient barrier. So, a table, a chair, moving around the front of a car, these are barriers that then inhibit or completely mitigate the enemy's ability to advance on you. Okay, obviously barring a projectile weapon where they can hurl a projectile over or through the barrier. Okay, so just so everybody has an idea. But a natural barrier would be someone is reaching in and an arm or a hand or an arm gets in the way. So it becomes an obstruction. That person now is unable to achieve an attachment. Okay, which is the second part, which is, of course, a connection where they get a hold. Now, you say, well, what if your arm's in the way, your hand's in the way, and the bad guy grabs a hold of your sleeve, he gets a hold of your wrist? Well, that's an attachment. So if somebody's trying to punch and they're throwing a barrage of punches and your arm comes up or your arm frames out and his punches are ricocheting or running into the arm, that is an obstruction. If all of a sudden he stops punching and he starts grabbing, wherever he makes contact on the body, the second that he has a hold of something, clothing, body part like skin, whatever hair, whatever he gets a hold of, that is now an attachment. Okay, so obstructions or attachments, and clearly we can see where an obstruction, a guy can turn that into an attachment. A guy could have an attachment, lose or release the attachment, and then still be impeded by a barrier or an obstruction. Okay, so this is kind of what I want to talk about. And I just want people to understand that when you're in close quarter work or in that close quarter proximity, these are two things that can either be your ally or your enemy. So again, is it us using obstructions as barriers? Is it us working on certain attachment points for leverage, okay, to give us an advantage? Or is it the exact opposite? Is it the bad guys are putting up obstructions or the bad guys are using attachments? So this is kind of what I want to break down for people. So before we get into any more specifics, just give me your guys' kind of visceral take on danger close engagements and obstructions versus attachments.
For me, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is the fact that it's inevitable. Mm-hmm. Like in that range, in that proximity, when you got somebody who is coming towards you with bad intentions, and you're find yourself facing violent criminal assault within that range, there's always some sort of barrier or attachment, in my opinion. Like, especially if the guy's like out because of something happened, but that's not really the realm of what we're talking about, then you're in a different situation. But like, it's like when somebody is using all of their effort to attack you, or you're using all your effort to defend your life, is like in that proximity, you are gonna run into a potential barrier, especially when we are talking about it if there's base and balance, right? So, it's one of those things that, we always say control follows awareness. So it's like, well, what do you do with that when you face one of those two elements in there? Because the one thing that we do know about close quarter is that there's no time. There's no time to think about, oh, well, if this, then that, if this, then that, if this, then that. Like, it's like shit's happening fast. Bullets are flying, whizzing right by your head. Like, you don't have the luxury of time to decipher. It's like, oh, he did this, so I should do this is my counter or my response to that. It's like, no, like, you're too close. You don't have the time to intellectually process that information. So again, it needs to be part of your survival motor program because of how to deal with those two elements in close quarter. Because it is going to be that it is going to be, this isn't the word that I want to use, but that intuitive sensitivity to be able to understand, not understand, but that is going to come out and deal with those things, not your mind. There's just no time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, for me, when you started talking about the concept of danger close from the military, and this is exactly what Brad just hit on. But for me, when you started talking danger close, because obviously in individuals dealing with violence, we don't have the luxury of things like airstrikes and stuff. But so for me, what hit right away was time. Like to me, it's like danger close for me is because of the timeline. When you're fighting in close quarter like that, like Brad just went into detail on, like you don't have time. And so for me, that's kind of what jumped out is like, why, what does danger close mean to me in violence? And I'm like, yeah, there's no time. As Brad just said, like you just don't have time to think your way through stuff. Everything has to be automatic at that point. And in regards to like attachments and obstructions, as you said, they can be helpful to you if it's you using an obstruction, or they can be a detriment if it's the other person, if it's the opposition using it. And where was I going with that? I lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me.
Well, that's okay
But
because
go
I can
ahead.
actually jump in off that point while you think
Yeah, go
about it.
ahead. We'll see if it comes back.
One of the things that I think about, and again, this idea of Brad talking about how obstructions and attachments are inevitable in a extreme, violent, all-out situation. They're going to happen. Okay, so I completely agree with that concept. The second part of that, and where my mindset is directed towards, is really dividing this. If we put me, so we say, okay, us, good guy, and remember, there can be natural obstructions or attachments where I'm physically grabbing somebody or I'm physically, putting up a barrier to keep somebody off me. A leg comes out, something to keep people off you, whatever it is. Even counter striking, where if someone comes in and you use a teep kick or a front kick kind of thing to push somebody away, you can say, well, okay, there was an obstruction. That obstruction actually impacted his body to knock him away. But you used that strike less as a way to injure him and more as a way to obstruct or stop or prevent, mitigate, or nullify his advance. Okay, so those are natural. But if you think about, like, for example, home invasion, well, you put a locked door on the front of your house, a good steel locked door. Well, what is that? It's not an attachment. The door doesn't fucking grab the guy. It's an obstruction, it's a barrier. You say, let's say they breach the front door. Well, then what happens is, for a lot of people, their furniture isn't feng shui designed, it's potentially tactically designed, right? Meaning your furniture creates natural funnels, choke points, where it is most likely that somebody, you look at your house and say, okay, these are the primary points of entry. We fortify those, put up better obstructions. If and when they do happen to breach those obstructions, they're now funneled down a certain way, choke points, where they run into other barriers of obstructions or obstacles and things like that. So if we're looking at it from the good guy perspective, obstructions and even potentially attachments of how you could then take control of somebody, these things, we can see how we can use these things to our advantage. So you make that part of your kill chain, part of your tactical planning, your strategic planning. But if I flip the script and say, well, what about violent predatory criminals? How would they benefit from using obstructions and attachments? And if we just look at this really quickly, let's start with attachments. For a lot of people, when there's bad intentions, people become like magnets. When two people have bad intentions, they get drawn together. They get into that's Brad's reference of inevitability. Is that two people with bad intentions going fuck you, and they can get drawn. And even though one is the attacker and one is the defender, if they don't have the right strategic training, if they don't have that unconventional warfare mindset, they can find themselves being magnetically pulled into danger close conflict. Right? Because the good guys, fuck you, I'm going to go down swinging, or you want some, come get some, and now all of a sudden you're in. Well, this opens up a very high likelihood of attachments. Grabs, throws, sweeps, you know what I mean? Chokes. Attachments, my perspective, attachments are fucking dangerous. Very dangerous. Because there's the obvious. But if you got a guy that outweighs you by 50 pounds or 100 pounds, someone much bigger and stronger than you getting a hold of you, literally getting a good attachment to you, is problematic. I don't care what anybody says. Size and strength matters. You can have a 150 pound or 150 pound guy or 110 pound woman, and you can teach her jujitsu for many, many years. If a 250 pound man grabs her with violent intentions, jujitsu is very fucking powerful and the leverage absolutely works. But when you have mass attack or a violent individual who also has a base, even if it's a low base of understanding of grappling skill set, it doesn't work like people think it works. It's not infallible. It's not the undefeatable system. You know, we see examples of jiu-jitsu being used on the street where someone who doesn't have a fucking clue what they're doing, and they're not necessarily, you know, they're aggressive and they might be trying to throw punches and stuff, but they're not necessarily the most violent individuals in the world. And this isn't even a jiu-jitsu debate. I'm just saying that I've been doing jiu-jitsu since 1993. Okay, so clearly I like it. Clearly I'm good at it. I'm well versed in it. Okay, but the last thing I want in a violent confrontation is to allow a bad guy to get an attachment. So for me, part of our strategies and tactics are, I have to say, listen, I'd rather make sure that my strategies and tactics, as it comes to them using obstructions and attachments against me, is I rather learn to prevent them, not counter them. And I think this is a very important distinction. It does not mean that you do not work counters. Somebody gets you in a choke, rear naked, guillotine, whatever. How do I then counter that? But you know, Tony Blauer was famous for this demonstration and asking, you know, typically picking the biggest guy in the room and that has jiu-jitsu or judo or some type of ground, you know, attachment training and saying, come on up and let me show you the greatest counter to a headlock that's ever existed. And of course, the guy'd come on stage and go to put him in the headlock and he would just push him away and just take a step back. And the guy would go to, you know, put the headlock on again and he would push him away again. And the guy'd be like, I thought you were going to show us a headlock counter. And Tony's response was, I just did. Like the whole thing was, I prevented it, not willingly let you put me in it so I could work some counter. The best counter is prevention. Right? What's the saying? I'm going to butcher the saying right now because I can't think of it. But
I think it's an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
There you go.
Something like that. Yeah.
No, I think you nailed it. We're going to go that is 100% correct. That's what I was going to try to say.
It's your fault, not yours.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right. Yeah.
But that is kind of my thought process when we talk about danger close work. Right now, when we talk about close quarter combat, for our purposes, I want either you have space, so you're either giving space and you have the ability to give space, or you're taking space. The last thing I want to do is exist and consent to being in space. And I hope that analogy sits with people, right? But you don't want to be danger close. And sometimes there's no choice. I mean, you're standing in line at a hockey game and all of a sudden, next thing you know, there's 2 or 3 guys standing danger close beside you. You happen to have your kid with you. So it starts from danger close. But you are either then needing to give space or take space. But to consent to stay in that space is inherently fucking dangerous. Why? Because if you actually then go into action, say, okay, I now physically have to defend myself, in that danger close space, they can put up obstructions which mitigate or nullify whatever injury you're trying to relay, okay? Or they get attachments. And if they get attachments, you're like, again, one big strong guy grabbing you and you say, oh, it's okay, but I do jiu-jitsu. Well, put 2 guys on you. When you got 4 hands and 4 legs and feet, grabbing, pulling, throwing, twisting, choking. Again, lots of guys are like, oh, we do mass attack in our dojo. We often wrestle 2 guys at the same time. No, you don't. And if you do, it doesn't go well because you're not doing it with punches and strikes and knives and clubs and all the other bullshit and all the melee and on the concrete and everything else that makes shit real. Right? It's different to wrestle with 2 guys trying to wrestle you and try to pin your legs or hold your arms. Violence, they don't try to pin your legs. Matter of fact, there's a video that just came out the other day where 2 guys get caught up. They start danger close. and they get caught up. One guy ends up on his back. The other guy is still standing. It's literally like the guy is trying to put the guy in the ground. The guy that's standing is trying to pass his legs. So this looks like a fucking jiu-jitsu. Only thing is, the guy on top, is he's trying to pass the legs and land blows. He didn't see the guy on the back, on the ground, on his back, pull the gun out of the belt line, reach underneath his own legs, put the gun right between the other guy's legs, the standing attacker, and shot him straight in the fucking balls. Just shot him, blew his junk right fucking off. Like, danger fucking close, attachments, which then led to an uninterrupted, violent, relaying of injury. Attachments are devastating. So the point, without turning, because again, it's a podcast. I can't sit here and say, let me show you how we prevent this stuff. But your mindset has to be, in danger close proximity, you must fucking prevent the obstructions and the attachments. There's a number of ways to do that. The simplest thing I can give people, and then Brad, you already said this once, and I want to just tie this in very clearly. The simplest way is to effectively use an obstruction or gain an effective attachment. They have to have base and balance. A bad guy needs base and balance. A good guy needs base and balance. If you can destroy or mitigate their base and balance, any attempt at an obstruction or any attempt at an attachment will be non-effective. Or remember again, the two words are, it will be greatly mitigated, so very, very impotent, or it will be completely nullified. You cannot achieve these two things when they have base and balance. Now, I'm going to let you guys throw in your 2 cents, but what this means is, in danger close proximity, again, I believe you need to either be outside or you need to be inside. So giving space or dynamically taking space, not consensually in space. Because if you consent and are in space, they will have base and balance, so will you. But the bigger, the stronger, the better equipped, the bigger the numbers, when you're outnumbered, the weapons, all that shit, obstructions and attachments are going to be what's on the menu. And you will eat it, and it will cost you. It's just, for every exception to that rule, there are very, very few exceptions to that rule. There is far more that are devastated by that rule, right? Just when you consent to stand there, obstructions and attachments are now on the menu. Okay, so really the conversation, now that you guys put your 2 cents in, can turn into the importance of taking base and balance, and why not just to neutralize these guys, but to prevent obstructions and attachments. Does that kind of track and throw down what you guys want off that?
Yeah, what I was going to say before when my thought escaped my head there, which you basically just unpacked, but was just that, how I said with danger close, I'm like, right away my brain went to like time, no time. But when you started talking about attachments and obstructions, again, coming from like the opponent side of things, the thing that hit me right away was risk. Like, just how much risk are you taking on? The second there's an obstruction in your way, your risk goes way up. The second there's an attachment, your risk goes way up for all the reasons you just literally unpacked. It's like, because then we also know, like, when there's an attachment, how much more likelihood is there that that's going to go to the ground now, potentially? How much harder of a fight are you in now? Because now you're on the ground, especially if it's mass attack, especially if there's weapons. It just gets exponentially worse. So to me, it's just like, yeah, that risk just, it escalates so fast as soon as you start talking about obstructions and attachments from their side. And then, like you also said, if you're the one using them, well, then it's the opposite. Your risk goes way down, right?
Yes. Yeah, 100%. And that's kind of one of the points that I want to get to in a few seconds, right? Because there is the game, right? Who's doing what? We need to prevent obstructions and attachments. The way you do that is by understanding the role that base and balance plays in their offensive capabilities, okay, or defensive capabilities for that matter. But on the converse, obstructions and attachments, especially obstructions, are very, very powerful on our side, okay, used effectively. I gave a bit of a home defense scenario side of things, and just to give people a simple kind of conceptual framework for this. But that is 100% true. Brad, go ahead.
Yeah, like I agree with the word risk. It is something that kind of popped in my head as well. But in a way that, it's kind of made me thinking is like, okay, so if you know where you're gonna go, right? Um, you're gonna go survival camping, or you're gonna go out into the wilderness. You're like, I'm just gonna, okay, what do I need to bring with me? So I'm prepared to go into that environment. It's like you're like, okay, well, I need this, I need this, I need this, I need like something for fire, something for food. So like you have these things that you take with you to prepare you to go to into this environment that you know is necessary for your survival.
Yeah.
And I don't really see it any different than this. And it's like, oh, you could go on a survival camping trip and not bring any of that shit, or not bring whatever. Again, you're taking on more risk.
Yeah.
But like when you're going into this environment, like if you're taking distance and you know that attachments are extremely dangerous, if the bad guy gets an attachment on you, or he gets obstructions on you, like those are dangerous to you. So what is your solution when you're taking up distance? And it's like, obviously the word I have is conviction, right? But it's like, well, you need to have um, the right tool going forward to go through that, to disrupt that base imbalance, because like now that you know that that's where you're going, you need something very specific so they can't achieve what they're trying to achieve on you. Is kind of like where my head went to. Maybe not the best analogy, but I try. I'm not the analogy guy. I know Dustin's the analogy guy, so I try my best tonight, guys, and hopefully I didn't let you down.
As do we all. You know what I mean? But Dustin likes to wait till we're wrapping up before he really breaks out the good ones. He saves it, right?
Yeah, because he knows he's leaving it with people.
Yeah,
and he's
exactly.
like,
The last
everything
thing,
we all remember is just what Dustin said.
Yeah, I don't remember what anyone else said other than that Dustin guy wrapped it up perfectly. I think like my perspective on this is the prevention over the counter, and yes, learning to work counters. If a guy gets an obstruction up, this is what Brad's talking, gets an obstruction in the way, how do I clear that obstruction? And that is, again, if we think military terms, a door is an obstruction. Well, they have breachers. Like assault teams have a breacher, and they are specialized in breaching. And they do it a number of different ways for a number of different structure types, because they need to know that if and when they come up against this obstruction, they know how to breach through it. So that is exactly the same type of work that we do, that everybody needs to do. You have to learn to clear obstructions. But I'm going to tell you with 100% certainty that although that is an imperative skill set you have to have, because inevitably there's going to be an obstruction, especially a designed obstruction like a doorway or something like that, a wall or whatever it is, you're going to have to learn how to clear that. But also, there is the preventative side of it, where you build strategies and tactics to go, well, what if we don't have to be slowed down or delayed, put the time in? Because again, what you're talking about is you're increasing risk. There's a risk that as you're getting set to breach or clear an obstruction, that you all of a sudden come under and you have contact with the enemy. And now you're in a bit of a choke point. You're in a bit of a sticky spot. So it's the same thing when it comes to just how to deal with bigger, stronger people, outgunned and outmanned. I do not want to have moments where I am caught up in an obstruction. If there's two guys and I'm giving space, and then all of a sudden there's an opportunity to take space, so you have them on linear lockdown, whatever it is you're doing, but you're now taking space, but this guy puts up an obstruction. Well, that obstruction equals time delay. Time delay equals opportunity for both parties, for that guy as well as his partner, the second guy, to recover, to rest, reorientate, re-equip. I mean, that's when all of a sudden now the guy's got a empty bottle in his hand, or the machete comes out, or the gun gets pulled out. Because yes, you're dealing with one person, but you can't fight more than one person at a time, and you can't clear more than one obstruction at a time. You can go from you can blast through or move through multiple obstructions very quickly and efficiently, but it takes time, and you can only do it one at a time. Okay? So there's lead obstructions, secondary obstructions, all these different types of things. So if, again, in the strategy, you're saying, what do they need to create an obstruction, which to get that delayed effect, they need their base and their balance. And so much of what we're talking about comes back to developing the ability to take somebody's base and balance. And it's like, for most people in the timeline of a violent encounter, they can't to take base and balance to where the base and balance is most vulnerable and therefore requires the least amount of effort to get the maximum result. If you wait till somebody's shields are up, the guy's in full engaged combat mode, and then you're trying to assault him in such a manner that you can take his base and balance, i.e., knock him the fuck out, that is like attacking a castle at the strongest, most fortified point. Like, it's just, you can do it, but it's going to come at a very, very, very high cost. Okay, and most likely is kind of really destined to fail. So again, it's hard not to talk specifics with this for how we actually do this, but those specifics won't mean anything to anybody because the terminology won't be understood by people, right? That's the concept of why we 3D people and flashbang people and smash and grab people and, you know, Trojan horse people and all of these different concepts, because we are solving problems that might not even fully exist yet. But you have to think of it tactically like that. You have to have a mission plan for saying what are the inherent dangers. Or you can just go in there and go, I don't give a fuck what he does. I'm just going to train to be bigger, stronger, faster, better armed, better equipped, more people with me at all times, blah, 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 blah. And now you can just purely train for a war of annihilation versus the war of attrition. And so when you start talking danger close CQC work, obstructions and attachments, those are deadly. And if you get hung up in those, I mean, it's going bushwhacking and getting caught up in the thorny vines, and it just fucking rips you apart. It just saps your energy, rips you apart. You might make it through, but it comes at a cost. Versus just having the foreknowledge to go, we're going to avoid this shit altogether, right? That again is the attrition-based mindset. That's the asymmetrical strategies, the unconventional warfare. You have to think of it from a different angle, right? So, I don't know. It's really unfortunate that, again, there's not a whole lot more we can really unpack with this, because then the next step is it comes down to actually training it and start, again, put in the work. So yes, learn to counter. Learn to counter all attachments and chokes and all these different things. Learn to clear like a good breacher would. Learn to clear and breach obstructions. But also make sure you put in equal, if not, I believe, more effort into what prevents these two things from ever happening. Take these two strategies, tactics, and tools out of the enemy's toolbox. Don't even give him the opportunity to get these going. And that is easier than most people think it is when you understand actually how to do prevention, right? How to do prevention training, not counter training. Okay? Now, let's just real quick, maybe as kind of the last angle of this. Conversely, when you think about home defense, if I think about my house in general, I think about obstructions. You look at the outside, and when somebody says, hey, listen, look how you have these big, tall, beautiful hedges that are maybe a little bit overgrown, or you got these big, beautiful trees, but they obstruct the view of your front entrance from the street. Well, whose obstruction is that? Is it mine, the homeowner, to protect my privacy? Or is that an aid to a criminal who might think, I want to break into this house. Here's the great news. Nobody can see me fucking around the front door because those trees are obstructing neighbors' views. Like, that's an obstruction. So you might trim those trees down to give a much better line of sight to take the obstruction advantage away from bad guy and, allow you, then you say, I got a good fortified door. I have, a ring camera. Cameras are obstructions. They are barriers. Now, maybe you might say, well, the camera doesn't prevent somebody from kicking in your front fucking door. No, but they do prevent people from as easily getting away with kicking in your front door, right? Because they're a means of identification. They are a early indicator system. I can see that there's somebody outside my door when I hear the first bang or kick or whatever. And now I can initiate other strategies that I have and other tactics that then become stronger barriers. One of which I like talking about it a lot is smoke grenades. They're just such a powerful thing. It takes a matter of seconds to fill your entire house with smoke. And guys kicking in your front door, coming in with guns even. I mean, they can be shooting randomly through the smoke, but most of them don't show up with, gas masks on, breathers on, and you might say, well, yeah, you're gassing yourself out too. Well, not if you have a secondary room with a good door barrier that you can fall back into, blah, 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 blah. So obstructions become huge. Attachments. You say, what are some examples of attachments? But there's not a lot of examples of attachments other than, again, when you put up obstructions that make it difficult for people to maneuver through. They get hung up and stuff, which, there's different examples of things that you could do with that. But it's the obstructions that really, really stand out when it comes to like home defense or something like that. So in your arsenal, you want to learn how to utilize obstructions. For me, the way I would think of attachments is why you have packets of zip cuffs everywhere. If I had to detain somebody, I have zip cuffs so that I can literally restrain somebody. I have bigger ones for the legs and I have smaller ones for the hands, right? Those might be in your car, those are in your home. So if you actually do have to detain somebody, you can easily restrain them. Well, that's an attachment. You bind his arms, you bind his legs. Having anchor points in your house, known anchor points. Maybe you have to tether somebody to something to control this person and prevent his escape while you're waiting for the police response. Okay, whatever that happens to be. Those are all, kind of different examples of, that's a different example of an attachment. So that's, again, something that we can look at that says this gives us an advantage. But always making sure, take the advantage away from the bad guys, stack the deck as much in our favor as we can, because remember, they have initiative. They are the ones choosing the time, the location, the duration, the intensity, the tools, and the numbers. They make all those decisions before they ever go looking for targets or victims for the most part, unless something manifests opportunistically. But that is what we have to overcome, is that initiative. Okay, so danger close work really pays to do some study into obstructions and attachments, both sides, good and bad, and figure out how to work those into your strategies and tactics. So I don't know, anything else that I just said kind of resonate, or you got something else you guys want to throw down range in this topic? Now would be the perfect time to do that. Here's the analogy moment. Here it comes, ladies and gentlemen.
No,
Pay attention.
not so much an analogy, more just something I think a lot of people can relate to. I know you guys can because you're fathers, but just thinking of like using obstructions to your own advantage. I just think of my kids as toddlers when they did not want to be picked up. It's like, you know what I mean? Everybody's been there at least once, and they it comes to them naturally.
Yeah.
But they can swing, flail, flop like. I mean, that's obstructions. Those are hard kids to pick up.
Yeah. They can get all kinds of limbs up in your face, pushing your head away and tilting your head off and stuff. Right, 100%.
It makes it way harder.
Makes it way harder, right? Yeah. So I don't know, Brad. Is there anything else that you want to throw down, range?
No, I think I'm good. I think I'm set on it.
Okay, so a little bit shorter episode tonight, but by no means does it undervalue the information that we're putting out there. And again, our whole goal is to stimulate thought. And this is absolutely a part of the CQC, or danger close engagements. And I think I end it with, from the most part, most people's whole world is hitting. So their solution to everything is hit harder, hit through it, hit more, strike first, strike hard, and keep hitting, that kind of thing. And it can be effective, but of course, the context determines the content. What's the standard that you train against? The standard that I hold myself to is they are bigger, they are stronger, they are faster, they are better, there's more of them, they're better equipped, they have all of these advantages. And so it really doesn't allow me to entertain for very long the idea of annihilation-based warfare, where because I train, I am therefore better than you. And so my punches are deadlier, my chokes are stronger, my this, that, whatever. Yes, you gain an advantage through training, but in war of attrition or attrition based warfare, those advantages are implemented differently, asymmetrically, like guerrilla warfare. That's where the average man has to come from, right? It's what do you do when a superior army shows up? Guerrilla warfare. It's proven time in and time out, right? That you can it works. It's just it's basically a form of terrorism. Okay, we are doing it as counterterrorism type tactics. Okay, in the aid in our survival as well as our families when outgunned and outmanned by violent predatory criminals. Okay, so anyways, that's just a different look at some CQC stuff, some danger close work, and some different food for thought. So, all right, guys, we'll leave it at that for tonight. Listen, I want to thank you guys for your time, your energy. Always appreciate it for all those that watch, share, like, comment, engage with us. We appreciate it. Man, I think we've said it before, right? The world now is crazy. I think it's crazier in the last little bit. There's just a lot of 2025 is going to be a very interesting year. It already is, and I just think it's going to continue to become very, very interesting with what's going on a global scale, never mind just in our cities and in our country. Very, very interesting stuff. So time will tell, but now more than ever, I think people need to take their own safety, security, and that of their families very, very, very seriously. And the only thing I can tell you for certain is that waiting till after something happens is always too late. It's just what kills more men is regret. Because you ought to have known better. You ought to have done more, and you didn't. So now's the time, man. You're running out of excuses. It's time to weaponize. It's time to rise regardless. And it's time to step into that role as your families and yours, your own first responder, right? And to do that, you deserve access to professional skill sets. So that's our mission. If we can help in any way, we're here to do that. So that's it. Thank you guys very much. To everybody else, stay safe, stay weaponized. We're going to chat again soon, everybody. Take care.